In a world full of distractions, there is one big question on every dog owner's lips.
How do I become more than just the person holding the other end of the leash?
We all get dogs with a dream in mind, a vision of the future. And if right now your everyday reality isn't quite that picture you had in mind, you are in the right place.
It really doesn't have to be this way.
You absolutely can and will be more to your dog than just the person who gets in between them and the world.
The key is you need to be more sexy.
More sexy than the neighbourhood cat.
More sexy than the jogger in the park.
More sexy than that half-eaten hamburger they just found on the floor.
And yes, even more sexy than the dog across the road.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Lauren.
Together we're Absolute Dogs.
And you're listening to the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast, the podcast that teaches you how to achieve real life results with your dogs.
Now, one of the most commonly asked questions and potentially very controversial questions is, oh my goodness, what do I do with my dog's hormones? Do I spay them? Do I castrate them? Do I keep them? Do I live with this hell I'm living with right now? Have I caused it? Can I give them something? Is there a supplement for that? Is there a game for that? And we see these owners time and time again, both Tom in the vet surgery and through sort of behaviour consults and from the centre, oh my goodness, from the training centre. I think this is probably one of the most commonly asked naughty but nice questions when people are either here as needing some input or need some training. It's just a really common question.
Absolutely. And it's one of those where actually it's really commonly advised to interfere with the dog's hormones.
I would say up until recently though, I would say actually a 6-month-old dog would routinely have just been castrated.
Yeah, and still
really,
is. Yeah,
really.
Yeah. The majority that's the majority of advice out there. And so what we're going to do in this episode is we're just going to talk through actually what the hormones actually do and what impact they're having. And we're not going to say, okay, you must do this, because the reality is that there's no kind of blanket rule. And that's really important that to say that at the moment there are a lot of people saying out there that there should be blanket rules. And the reality is that from a behavior perspective, we're not talking about population control, we're talking about behavior. Actually, that's not the case, and it's on an individual basis.
And I think the most important thing here is that everyone makes their own correct, informed decision. And I think when you don't have the information, then you can't necessarily make that informed decision. And at least if you've made an informed decision, then you go ahead in that way. And let's be honest, once that decision's made, it's a pretty difficult one to take back. Yeah. So it's not something that you want to take lightly. And at the same time, if you make an informed decision and you're happy with that informed decision, then go with that. Yep. So I think here's where the information's at. Are you ready?
So if we let's start with male dogs, okay? So the hormone that we're particularly interested in when it comes to male dogs is testosterone. Now, testosterone is produced in the testicles, and so what we have to think about is what actually happens when we neuter, or depending on what word you use, sterilize, neuter, castrate, whatever you want to, whatever word you choose to use. They get chopped off, and you can't stick them back on once they have been chopped off.
Are you sure, Tom?
And so this is a really important thing to say. This is an irreversible procedure, and it's often recommended for behavior reasons. Now, actually, what does testosterone do from a behavior perspective? Well, the big thing that it does is it's actually a hormone of confidence, so it increases confidence. And what we have to think about is often the behavior struggles where castration, neutering, sterilization is recommended for male dogs they're often behavior struggles that are motivated by anxiety. You think about barking and lunging at other dogs, getting worried about other dogs, separation anxiety, resource guarding, even down to like jumping up at people. Who's to say that your dog is jumping up at people because they love people, and actually could they be worried about people, and that's their way of coping with that? So before we dive into the evidence, actually suggesting an irreversible removal of a hormone for life based on that is in itself questionable. Now, What evidence is there? Well, there's very little evidence in the vet world in general. In that there's not the large scale studies that are done in humans, and there's often not the budget to be able to do those studies. But there is a study done by McGreevy et al. In 2018, and what they did is they looked at how long a dog had the benefit of testosterone for. So how long had the testicles been attached for as a percentage of that dog's life, right? Now, the interesting thing is they then looked at various behaviour struggles and behaviour challenges that dogs have, and the interesting thing is that two behaviour struggles were significantly more likely the longer the dog had testosterone. So the two behaviour struggles in question that were much more likely if the dog was not castrated, therefore suggesting the benefit of castration, was indoor urine marking and howling when left alone. Now, the two. So you take that information, you think, interesting. It seems to me like this testosterone is not doing any good. Now, the interesting thing is they then looked at what behaviour struggles would be improved by keeping the testosterone, by keeping the testicles attached, and the answer is that the longer the dog had the benefit of testosterone, there was a number of behaviour struggles that were significantly less likely to happen. Now, bear in mind, two prior to this, right? Two got worse the longer they had testosterone. 26 got better the longer they had testosterone.
26.
And 8 of those related to fearfulness, and 7 of those related to what the researchers labelled as aggression. Okay, now, regardless of, we're not kind of discussing these labels. What we're discussing is the fact that actually 26 mostly unwelcome behaviours were actually reduced, less likely to happen the longer those dogs had testosterone.
Tom, just give us a couple of examples that are on there. Just a couple of the examples, because I think these really are things that make a difference.
Absolutely. So these included things like how did the dog respond to seeing another dog? How did the dog behave around other dogs? How did the dog respond to the noises, for example? These were much less likely to happen the longer the dog had testosterone. Now, of course, with every study, there's elements that we could discuss in relation to the study design, and whether, for example, I don't know, the dogs that have behaviour struggles are more likely to be recommended to be castrated, and therefore maybe that had some influence on the results. But the reality is that it was really quite definite in terms of the numbers 2 versus 26 that suggest that actually we should certainly not be immediately suggesting castration for the benefit of behaviour.
There should always be questions asked, and there should always be considerations to be had. I own a young male dog myself, and I can certainly say from, I don't know, around 6 months old, I could see his behaviour change right through to where he is currently. And actually, I've seen him go through stages of huge oozing confidence, and then also stages where confidence has really been lacking early on. And actually, in all of those stages, I can't think of a day where I've thought, I'm going to castrate him. And that doesn't mean you guys should or shouldn't castrate your dogs. I think it means that we should raise this question as to, is it the right thing to do for my dog right now? And actually, is it the right thing to do right now? Yes, no. And actually, I can reassess this again in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, in 12 months.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, from really, if we had to pick a blanket rule, actually, the blanket rule that I'd put in place would be that no dog should be castrated for behaviour reasons without the benefit of first having a behaviour consult. Because if this dog has behaviour struggles, then why don't we determine if this irreversible procedure is required or not? And then the second thing is actually there are reversible options when it comes to neutering male dogs. So, for example, there's an implant that's available that goes under the dog's skin, much like a microchip would, and that effectively emulates all of the effects of a surgical castration, but they last 6 months or 12 months. months, depending on which size you use. And so if there was a sudden deterioration or a deterioration over the 6 months, then actually you can get the testosterone back, right? You can, that implant's going to wear off, and in turn the testosterone levels are going to increase, and you get the benefit of them again.
And I really like, alongside Tom, I have many vet friends and people in the vet world that we know, and I love that many surgeries now are going down this route of actually we need to have these conversations and potential consults with our clients. And also what I really like is some of them have a policy that they will not do a dog before a certain age now, whereas actually a few years back you just didn't hear of that. So they actually will have policies of dogs not being done routinely. And again, like Tom said initially, this isn't the norm, and yet this is definitely something that is growing in awareness.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. And so if you're in the situation of thinking, oh my gosh, my dog's already being castrated, don't worry, because there's a game for that, and there's things that we can do and make things better. If you're in that stage of wondering whether it would be of benefit, and people are constantly saying to you, oh, it's because he's not neutered, then actually, you know what, rather than take from somebody who actually is just saying that because that's what everybody says, actively, maybe it's a time to get a behaviour consult and get advice. Because before we think about doing something that's totally irreversible, and then when we do want to do it, we might say, let's do reversible first, and then if the effects are as you wanted them, then you can go for the irreversible as a kind of next step. So that was male dogs. Now, female dogs, a little bit different again. And female dogs, in terms of their hormones, are really cool, okay? Because dogs are unique as a species in that female dogs, when they have a season, for 9 weeks following that season, about 63 days following that season, they hormonally have the same hormonal changes as if they were pregnant. So the hormone of pregnancy is progesterone, and most species of animal, they have a season, and if they don't become pregnant, then progesterone drops very quickly, and that's that. Whereas dogs, every time they have a season, regardless of whether they are become pregnant or not in that season, and the progesterone gets higher and higher and higher, and it stays high for about 9 weeks, but 60 odd days. Now, why is that interesting? Well, progesterone is a very interesting hormone from a behavior perspective. And what it does is it often causes dogs to become more pessimistic, to startle more easily. It causes them to want to possess resources a little bit more and fight for them.
They definitely become, I would say, hyper-vigilant and more aware and more alert. And so if you've ever lived with a hormonal female, be that, lots of different hormonal females, but for sure dogs, you really see these things start to play out, right? And each season they have, I would say that you see more of it.
And that the interesting thing is that progesterone, if we think about in terms of the game changer world, and we're thinking about buckets and buckets filling, progesterone is a real bucket filling hormone. And so from the point of view of behavior, if you think that most entire female dogs, they'll have a season every 6 months. So they have a season every 6 months, and for 2 months following that season, they have high progesterone, where they're potentially in this state of more full bucket, potentially increased reactivity, more pessimistic. That means that 4 months of the year, you've actually got a dog who is much more susceptible to developing behavior struggles like reactivity to other dogs, like fear responses to loud
feeling
noises.
Like they need to guard things and look after things and possess them for themselves.
Separation
and actually
anxiety.
Difficult to live with when they're like this, and can be for sure looking worried, anxious where they weren't before.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that the other challenge and sort of interesting thing about dogs is if you've got multiple entire females in the same house, they will often kind of synchronize their seasons. Now, this is where it gets really worrying, because you've got 2 females coming into season at the same time, then they've each got 2 months where they can be very offended by the other female's behavior and think that the other female is dangerous, and equally the other female can do do the same. And so those can be quite fragile relationships. They can be quite fragile households. Certainly from a vet behaviour perspective, I see a lot of behaviour consults where there are entire females in a house together and struggles have started within those 2 months following a season, right? And so from the point of view of behaviour, again, we're not going to give blanket kind of recommendations or rules. What we're instead going to say is we're going to talk to you about what hormones do from a behaviour perspective, and then that's then down to your individual situation and your conversations that you want to have with, you know, the team that you surround yourself with, so that you can get the best outcome and make the best choice.
What Tom says there is really, really relevant. When you chat to the team around you, I think it is a team, and I think it is a team approach. And for sure, I've had some advice from some of my team and then other advice from others in my team. And that doesn't make one person right or wrong. No. It just means you feel more informed. And I know sometimes that might not help because you feel like you're indecisive in it. But we've had these conversations, Tom, on dogs. And actually, the other thing I think is really important here is you don't have to make that decision right now. So you don't have to make that decision today. You can make it in a few days' time. You can make it in a few months' time. You can make it in a few years' time. You may sit on it.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice thing that you don't have to rush it. Like, it's definitely not one to take lightly or to not consider. And
the thing is, like, you know, especially neutering, spaying, sterilizing a female, whatever you want to call it, it's a not an insignificant procedure. It's removal of a large vascular organ through abdominal surgery, right? That in itself is important. And I'll often have these conversations with behavior clients where I'm like, actually, progesterone's not really helping this struggle, but equally her having surgery and the soreness that's going to come from the surgery and how that's going to fill a bucket
is also not insignificant.
Exactly. 3 weeks of recovery. I think we've got a few things that we need to resolve first, and then we can resolve the progesterone. It might be that they say, okay, well, she was in season, you know, a couple of weeks ago. It's like, well, right, we've got 6 months to get a plan in place and things under control.
Before there's another one.
And before there's another one. So really, this is where blanket rules just do not work when it comes to hormones and dogs.
Just like Tom said earlier, I think it's really important if you have already had spay and castration, like, we're not trying to make you feel good or bad. We're literally making sure that everyone feels a little bit more informed. Yeah. Both Tom and I have had spayed females. Both Tom and I have had entire females. Yeah. I've got an entire male. Yeah. I have to be honest, I've never castrated a male dog of my own. And at the same time, health reasons at some point might make that important. Yeah. And so that might come in later. But in the sense of a dog, I haven't yet had to.
And the interesting thing is there absolutely are potential health benefits of remaining entire and being neutered, and this is where again the conversation is about discussing it and considering it for that individual. The health benefits that come to a male dog, the nice thing about that in a way, the health benefits that come from neutering a male dog, they're not really a problem or a struggle until 5 years on older. And so actually, if you're thinking you want to preserve your entire male dog's testosterone because you're working on some behavior struggles and you don't want to make them worse, from that point of view, it's not like a ticking clock. It's a little bit different when it comes to entire females, but actually, the decision doesn't need to be made right today.
And I think that's the biggest one with clients that we see, isn't it, Tom, here, is that actually customers think they need to make it now. Actually, you have a little bit of time to think on it. And I suppose that's the most important thing that we wanted you to feel listening in on today's podcast, is that you can be informed. Yeah. You can become your own dog's expert, just like the many thousands of people that have been through our programs or the training academy or pro dog trainers or Sex and a Squirrel clients. Like, all of these people make informed decisions for their dogs and become their dog's expert.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are many things to consider. In some areas of the world there are population control considerations. Interestingly, in Scandinavian countries, neutering of females and male dogs is considered a mutilation,
Whereas
they actually have less overpopulation problems than countries where dogs are routinely neutered, which questions the involvement.
Whereas you do consider, like us, I know countries potentially like America and many other places that will actually neuter really, really very early. And I think it's really important we don't go down the judgy path where we judge one or the other. I think what is really important is we understand there's information out there and it's there to be had.
And it's a very emotive subject. I remember the first time I filmed a quick video about male dogs and whether we should be neutering them routinely. And the amount of I remember I filmed it quickly, uploaded it. I went into my next consult, came out of the consult, and it was like 60,000 people had viewed the video, and my inbox was full of people saying that they were going to castrate me, and because I said something that was controversial.
You had people going to castrate you, and then you also had, I think, some rescue centres absolutely
shocked that I'd said
livid.
If we don't open the conversation, and I think it should be, this is where it's important in that it should be a conversation, not threatening to castrate me.
And no like crazy judginess. Like, we're not judging either way. It's more like, are we informed?
Yeah.
And are we able to make an informed decision rather than a rushed decision or a pressure decision? Or, let's be honest, many of us walk into our vet surgeries and you take that vet's word as gospel. And let's be honest, there are other vets and there are other opinions. And I've met many vets in my time, and often they all have very different opinions, and none of them are wrong or right necessarily. You are working with individuals, and I like that you'll get like a bespoke service to a degree. And some things obviously are the same, but
within everything you have experts, right? And
sure.
So from the point of view of everything that I've talked about, it's from a behaviour perspective. This is what these hormones do, and when I say routine castration, what I'm referring to is actually the routine default thing that people might say when a dog has a behaviour struggle of, oh well, he's
Castrate
entire,
him.
what do you expect? You need to castrate him. And that's really, really not the case. And then it's down to the individual as to what we do and how we manage that.
And I think that is very, very much still the typical behaviour problem, castrate. And I think that's definitely something that people do regret having done it. Now let's take the consideration of someone has already gone down this route, Tom.
Yeah.
Because I know that you are listening thinking, I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish I'd been better informed. So how can we put ourselves in a better place?
The cool thing is that the brain can be reshaped regardless of whether it's got testosterone going into it or not, right? And so the reality is that you're in the right place. You've just got to play games that reshape that brain and play the right games, teach the right skills and the concepts, train for the situation rather than repeatedly putting your dog in the situation. And the other cool thing is that actually there are areas of the body that do produce testosterone in the absence of having the testicles. And one of the ways that that you can actually get an increase in testosterone is short bursts of exercise and activity. Now, interestingly, if we think about 3-minute games, that's exactly what that is achieving, right? And so from the point of view of they've been chopped off, you can't stick them back on. The cool thing is you're playing games, you're listening to this playing games, which means you're both reshaping the brain and also you're actually promoting testosterone. And so you're exactly who you need to be and where you need to be, and you're doing exactly the right things.
And if you've got a dog and you think, oh, I'm listening and I'm thinking this is my dog and my dog needs this, think about what your dog does really need. So likely to be confidence. Some of the games that we might play for confidence, let's just shout out a couple. Let's do cardboard chaos, knock them over, noise box, lots of different cool games, novelty party, and there's lots of cool games that we play all in our training academy. Sexy the Squirrel's also full of our games. We absolutely would say join us, get involved, play the games. It's not too late, it's never too late. Your dog can take part whether they've got their testicles or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, guys, on that bombshell, we'll see you next week, and it's going to be a really fun episode next week. So you kind of go out there, play some games. In the meantime, stay sexy. Hey, before you go, have you taken part in the worldwide Sexier Than a Squirrel Challenge?
It's a 25-day online video program, huge energy, amazing community, and over 6,000 people are already taking part.
The only question is, you know where you are today, where do you want to be 25 days from now? Head to absolutedogs.me/sexy.